I sat in my car with the engine off, keys pressed into my palm, and the night around me felt like a closed room. 3 miles from any signal, the only sound was my breath and a far coyote. I had been left there because I refused to hand over the one thing that was mine. Their taillights were already gone. What happened next changed everything. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Tap like, hit subscribe, share this, and stay with me through the mile. I grew up on a street where the lawns were mostly even, and the mailboxes leaned at the same angle as if the wind had agreed to be polite. The town had one high school, 2 grocery stores, a courthouse that rang on the hour, and a summer festival where the same cover band played the same set every year. We were the kind of family that waved to neighbors, shoveled sidewalks after snow, and kept holiday boxes labeled with black marker in a basement that smelled like laundry detergent and damp cardboard. Inside our house, everything had a place. The good dishes in the china cabinet, the vacuum tucked behind the cleaning closet door, my father's paper on the end table next to the lamp with the yellow shade, the television volume set just low enough to let my parents talk over it while the evening news ran. My mother favored order and a hard shine. She polished the faucet every night as if the world would look at it in the morning. My sister, 2 years younger, was the light my parents always found. She was born with a kind of gravity that made people step closer. My parents leaned toward her without noticing how their bodies angled away from me. When we were little, I was the child who carried the extra sweater and the spare tissues. She was the child who ran ahead and never worried about getting lost because someone would always go looking. On my birthdays, the gifts solved problems. A jacket on clearance with a zipper that sometimes stuck at the waist. A stack of spiral notebooks that I actually needed. Socks from the 3-pack. I said thank you. I hugged my mother. I ate a slice of cake and wrapped the rest for the next day. On my sister's birthdays, the table turned into an ocean of bright paper. Tissue exploded from bags. Ribbons curled on the floor. There was perfume one year, a small gold necklace the next, a sleek hairdryer after that, and then a camera that everyone took turns using while she posed. My father ran the show. My mother clapped on the beat. I cut the cake, passed the plates, and wiped the counter when the frosting smeared. Chores had a way of finding me even when I stood still. The list grew without anyone saying a word. I learned where the extra trash bags lived and how to fold fitted sheets alone. I learned how to scrub a bathtub until it looked like a promise. My sister had reasons to be elsewhere. She needed to rest for practice. She had to meet a friend for a project. She had a headache. My parents nodded, generous with her time. I took a breath and did the thing that needed doing because it would have to be me, and I did not want to hear the argument that followed if I said no. There was a mug that I claimed without ceremony. White porcelain. The handle had cracked once, and someone, likely me, glued it back together so carefully that the seam looked like a faint scar. It did not match the pretty set my mother used when guests visited. It was not chosen. It was left behind, so it became mine. I liked the way it warmed my hand. I liked that no one else reached for it. After dinner, I would stand at the sink, mug of tea breathing steam into my face, and look out the window at the porch light. The bulb hummed a tired note. Moths threw themselves at it like it promised something. I watched and wondered what I was promising to myself by staying quiet. In our family album, I am present, but I am mostly the edges. I hold coats. I frame the picture. I catch my sister's dropped bracelet. When I think about those images now, I understand that absence can happen in the middle of a room. It does not require an empty chair. It can bloom in broad daylight while everyone is laughing. I learned early to hold my breath and be useful. I learned how to keep my voice inside my mouth. High school taught me algebra and also how to keep a ledger in my head that tracked what I owed and what I was owed. The second number stayed small. I got a job at a corner store that sold batteries, cough drops, postcards with our town's gazebo printed in fading ink, and a rotating rack of sunglasses that creaked when you turned it. The manager introduced herself the first day and told me she believed in 2 things. Count your drawer twice and look people in the eye. She wore sneakers that squeaked against the tile, a single silver bracelet, and a ponytail held by a thick band that never broke. I learned how to read customers by the way they approached the counter. Tense shoulders meant they needed help, but did not want to ask. A sigh meant they were about to complain about price. The best ones looked tired in a way that made me want to soften my voice. I learned that kindness can be specific. Hold the receipt out so they do not have to reach far. Turn the bag so the handle points toward them. Say the words that make their shoulders drop a half inch. That will be all. Take your time. I can help you out to the car if you need. I took my first paycheck home and placed part of it in the grocery envelope. I tucked another portion into a jar in my closet that I labeled with a sticky note that read later. That jar became a kind of lighthouse in a room where nothing belonged to me for long. Later grew by dollars and fives. Sometimes by the coins from my pockets that I counted by sound. My sister lived in the glow of other people's attention. She joined dance and needed shoes that I could not believe cost that much until my mother paid without blinking. She needed a dress in a specific shade that the store did not stock, so my mother ordered it from a catalog and paid extra for shipping. There were rehearsals and recitals. There were flowers in vases on the kitchen table that she took pictures of for weeks. My father learned to whisper when she got into the car after practice so as not to disturb the mood before a performance. I joined nothing that cost money. I went to school, went to work, and came home to thaw chicken for dinner. I earned grades that could have been celebrated, but were not. When report card night arrived, I placed the folded paper beside my mother's plate. She skimmed it and asked if I had filled the gas can for the mower. My sister arrived late to the table. She announced an audition with a director who once worked in a city everyone admired. My father put his fork down and told us all to listen. I learned to eat quickly. I fell in love one spring with a boy who wrote small poems on gum wrappers and put them in a cup on his desk. He had hair that would not lie flat and a grin that landed in the pit of my stomach. When he broke up with me by text on a Wednesday, I sat at the edge of the tub and held the message like a piece of metal that would eventually cool. I went downstairs to wash my face at the kitchen sink. My mother walked in and reached past me for the glass cleaner. When I said that I was sad, she told me not to turn small things into big ones. A week later, my sister cried for 2 hours because a friend posted a photo without tagging her. My parents walked plates of cut fruit to her bedroom and sat at the edge of the bed while she practiced an expression that looked like someone thinking about forgiveness. At night, I wrote. I did not write poems. I wrote inventory. I wrote the sound of my father's spoon against a cereal bowl after the evening news, the way the porch light buzzed louder right before it failed and then returned, the scent of bleach rising from a bucket, the peculiar comfort of a floor that showed a clean streak after one pass. I wrote questions that thinned in the space between sentences. When had I learned that my quiet made other people comfortable? When did my silence begin to be mistaken for consent? Sometimes I tried to picture myself somewhere else. I dreamed about a tiny car, nothing fancy, that could take me across town and back on a whim. No red bow, no applause, just a reliable engine and a seat that remembered me. I would drive to the library after closing and drop books through the slot. I would stop at a park with a pond and sit in the driver's seat long enough to watch ducks argue. I would adjust the mirror and see my face tilted at a new angle. For a long time, those images were enough to keep me moving. I told the jar in my closet that later would become now. It took longer than I wished, but time moves even when no one is watching. After graduation, I found work at a healthcare clinic 5 miles from home, where the lobby smelled faintly like citrus cleaner and photocopier heat. Mornings began with the printers rattling and the phone kicking off a chorus that did not stop until lunch. The waiting room took turns being restless and reverent. I learned to pronounce last names by listening first, and to make a pot of weak coffee that somehow satisfied the most impatient people in the county. The job did not pay glory. It paid rent in other lives. It paid an electricity bill I would never see, and a grocery total I did not control. Every payday, I peeled off a portion of the check and placed it in my mother's hand. She did not say thank you. She said good. Then she told me we were out of aluminum foil, or that the vacuum was making a noise, or that I should not use the good towels to dry the dog if she got caught in the rain again. My father grunted something about responsibility and told me adult life was simple if you did not complicate it with feelings. A letter arrived from a city 2 hours away inviting me to interview for a clerical position in a hospital that would have changed my view. It would have paid a little more and trained me to manage records in a system bigger than our town's gossip. I carried the envelope around in my coat pocket for a full day because the weight of it felt like a secret. When I showed it to my parents, My mother said that moving out now would put a strain on the house. My father said that family stays. He did not say I had outgrown anything. He only said that people who think they are too good for where they came from end up discovering that no one else wants them either. I called the number the next day and thanked the woman for her time. I told her I could not come. I do not know the exact day later turned into now, only that one afternoon in autumn I found myself standing in a stranger's driveway while he lifted the hood of a used sedan the color of wet gravel. The car had a dent on the rear bumper like someone had been careless in a parking lot and not brave enough to own up to it. The radio worked as long as you did not ask for more than it was willing to give. The heater blew with conviction but took a minute to warm. The seller had kept a folder of maintenance records with dates written in a tidy hand. The test drive felt like slipping into a rhythm I already knew. When we returned, I counted my money twice and told him what I could offer. He looked at me for a quiet second, then nodded and said the keys were mine. I sat in the car at the curb with both hands on the wheel and felt something gather in my chest like a flock deciding to leave the wire. I drove home slowly on purpose to make the road last longer. At stoplights, I looked sideways into other cars and imagined I was a person with a life that belonged to her. I pulled into our driveway and parked in the spot that had always belonged to everyone else. The porch light blinked like an old eye. My mother stepped out and asked if I had enough sense to get good insurance. My father told me not to waste gas running errands no one assigned me. My sister asked if I could take her to a rehearsal on Thursday. I said yes that first time, because I had not yet learned that some kindnesses are a down payment on other people's expectations. Over the months that followed, my car went out into the world with people who were not me more often than I drove it. My sister asked and my mother turned the ask into a command. Help your sister. She has auditions. She cannot risk being late. She cannot risk being stranded. When I said I needed the car for work, my father told me to plan better. When I said she should return it with the same amount of gas, my mother said they did not keep score in this family. I started locking the doors when it was in the driveway, not to keep thieves out, but to remind myself that what I owned had a boundary. One morning, I found new scratches across the trunk that no one admitted. I ran my hand over the paint and felt my face heat. That was the day I told myself a sentence I could not unknow. If I did not protect this, nothing I had would survive the taking. It began like a small favor in a week full of them. My mother wanted me to drive out to a friend's place to pick up a plastic tote filled with winter table linens that had been borrowed. The house sat down a county road that narrowed to 2 lanes without markings once you left the main highway. My father said it would be quick and that my sister should ride along to help lift. We left after dinner, while the evening still held the warmth of the day. The porch light hummed behind us. Moths hammered the glass. The sky tilted toward deep blue. In the car, my sister performed a conversation that she could have done alone in a mirror. She had news about a community theater director who might be able to connect her to someone who knew someone. She described the way he looked at her in a way that made me think of stage lights rather than human eyes. She segued into her real point, the way a dancer turns without breaking the line. You should let me use your car this semester. It will open doors for me. You can make alternate plans. You always do. I counted what I had learned about being honest without being cruel, and decided that I could not afford politeness if it cost me my life. I said no. Not never, but no to a semester of ownership that was not hers to claim. I told her my schedule required reliability. I told her I had appointments and shifts, and that my car was not a guest star. She sighed so long that the window fogged. She drew a heart with 2 careless strokes and did not look at me. The house we drove towards sat by itself. No neighboring porch lights, no dogs barking. A steady square of lamplight fell across the front steps. A plastic tote waited under the overhang. The gravel popped under our tires as we pulled in. I slid the gear shift into park and stepped out. The air smelled like cut hay. Crickets maintained a private conversation in the ditch. I lifted the tote's lid to make sure we had the correct one. The neat handwriting on the tape read linens for Linda. I smiled at the fact that alliteration survives in every county. When I turned back to the car, the locks had clicked. The driver's seat was empty. My sister had moved quickly, a learned art. A pickup truck had eased in behind us without headlights, quiet as a held breath. My father sat behind the wheel. My mother, passenger side, stared past me at something that did not exist. My sister was already leaning into their cab, her hair a curtain that had always kept the rest of us out. I walked to my own car and tugged on the handle. It held fast. I knocked on the glass because I could not think what else to do with my hands. The pickup pulled forward slow enough to make me think they might stop. My father did not look at me. My mother pinched her lips as if a lemon lived there. My sister rolled down the window and said I should call when I was ready to act like family. Then the truck turned back onto the road and rolled away. The tailgate grew smaller. The sound of gravel under tires softened and then became the sound of crickets again. The porch light washed the steps with a square of weak gold. My phone said no service. The sky leaned in with its whole weight. I sat in the driver's seat and placed my hands where they belonged. I did not cry. I did not yell into the shape of the house or the dark that swallowed the road. I examined the way my breath sounded when I did not make it try to be anything other than air. I could have turned back right then, driven home and pretended that this was a misunderstanding. I could have texted a promise I would never keep and returned to a system that would always take and then demand an apology for not taking faster. Instead, I turned the key. The engine cleared its throat and then settled. I pulled out, easing the tires away from the ditch, and drove the way you drive when you know the road, but do not trust it anymore. I did not think the words abandon until I reached the highway and saw the sign that pointed toward town like a command. That was when my mouth said the sentence out loud so the world would hear. They left me. They left me here because I would not give them what they wanted. The sentence did not break me. It arranged something inside me with click after click, as if bones had been out of place and now were sliding into their rightful notches. The gas station near the highway glowed in a way that made the bugs look like a storm trapped under the canopy. I parked by a pump that did not ask for my card because the store was closed. The night air tasted like rubber and heat from engines that had already left. I sat with the window cracked and watched the empty road like it might send a sign. My phone remained blank. If a person wanted to design a moment that felt like a test, it would look like this. Bright light, empty distance, a choice you could make into a story later if you wanted to pretend it had been harder. I drove home because that is where my belongings were, and because ending one chapter requires packing and not just leaving a room in a cinematic way. The porch light was still on, an old soldier pretending not to wobble. The living room held my father's chair like a throne for a kingdom I no longer served. I drank a glass of water in the kitchen and looked at the clean counters as if they belonged to a museum. I took the cracked mug down from its place, turned it over, and read the faint line where the glue had made a path. I wrapped it in a dish towel and set it in a small box with my name on it. I understood then that some objects are not expensive, but they still cost a great deal to lose. In my room, I slid the suitcase from under the bed. Dust rose like a small flock of birds and then settled. I rolled socks into pairs and tucked them into the corners. I folded jeans into clean stacks. I included 2 sweaters for the way your body gets cold when you make a hard decision, and then tell the truth about it. I put my journal in the top with a pen stuck through the spiral so it would not leave me when I needed it. I emptied a tin of quarters into a cloth bag. I tucked a photograph of myself at 15 behind the zipper. In that photo, I had no idea that duty can turn into a cage when it is welded together with fear. My phone found a bar of service and then another. Messages came in a row like bricks falling off a truck. My sister wrote that she hoped I had calmed down. My mother wrote that I needed to remember how to be a good daughter. My father wrote that I was stubborn and that stubbornness ruined women. I read every word and felt nothing except a widening field in my chest. Not relief, not triumph. Just a kind of quiet that made space for the next thing. At 2 a.m. I sat on my bed with my hands resting on my knees and made a list in my head of what I owed the people downstairs. The list was very short. I stood and placed a note on the kitchen counter. It did not explain itself like a petition. It was brief. I will be safe. Do not call. I am not coming back. I picked up the box with the mug, carried my suitcase out, and closed the front door with care because even in departure, I wanted to leave the place as I had found it. The porch light drew circles around moths. I set the suitcase in the trunk. I slid into the driver's seat. I put my hand on the wheel and told the car thank you because gratitude does not require an audience. The engine turned over without drama. I pulled into the street and did not look in the rearview mirror because I did not want to see the house small enough to fit inside a rectangle. I wanted the road ahead to fill my eyes. The motel by the interstate looked tired in a way that comforted me. The clerk wore a knit cap and a sweatshirt that had seen better days. He did not ask for details. He took my cash and handed me a key attached to a plastic fob that had the number stamped into it. The room smelled like HVAC and old soap. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the heater rattle itself into warmth. When I slept, I dreamed of a long hallway with doors on both sides and my own key in my hand. Morning arrived like a favor. I walked to the diner next door and ordered eggs and toast from a woman with a braid thick enough to be a rope. She called me honey without making it sound like a performance. She refilled my coffee halfway each time as if she believed in the power of the middle. I ate slowly and realized that ordinary kindness is more filling than food. I found a small apartment above a store that sold hardware and birdseed. The lease was straightforward, and the landlord used plain words. The walls were thin enough to let in laughter from the hallway, which made the place feel alive rather than cheap. I bought a couch with a sag that matched my spine, and a lamp with a pull chain that clicked in a way that made my hands relax. I placed the cracked mug on an open shelf in the kitchen and set my car keys on a hook by the door. I planted a succulent in a clay pot and learned how to turn it so it would not lean too far toward the window. At the clinic, I added a weekend shift for a while and tucked the extra into a savings account that I named Freedom on the online banking page. I learned to say no to overtime when my body clock begged for mercy. People at work saw me as a person and not a resource. A nurse taught me how to stretch my hands so my fingers would not ache from typing. A younger coworker asked me for advice on a resume. A doctor once said thank you for finding an error in a chart before it reached a patient. I kept those small bouquets in my head for days and watered them with memory when nights felt long. A friend from the clinic invited me to a walking group that circled the park near the library. The path took us past a pond where geese argued like old couples. She asked me how I took my coffee and then remembered later without asking again. I did not tell her my whole history at first. I told her small things, that I liked cinnamon on toast, that I kept a list of synonyms in my phone because language gives me pleasure, that the porch light at my old house had a sound I could identify with my eyes closed. She did not flinch. She told me she likes to sit in her car sometimes before going inside because the air in that small space belongs to her alone for a few minutes. There were setbacks like pebbles in a shoe. I heard through a relative that my parents told a version of the story in which I was ungrateful and mean. I got a text from a number I did not know that turned out to be my sister using a friend's phone to ask if I would bring her scarf to a rehearsal space because she had left it in my trunk weeks ago. I placed the phone face down on the counter and let the request evaporate like steam. I had nothing to deliver anymore except to myself. It felt like a boundary set kindly for both of us. My car needed new brake pads. The mechanic explained the issue with diagrams and no condescension. He gave me a range of choices with clear consequences. I approved the work that kept me safest. I walked home past a bakery where the morning bread still steamed under paper. I bought a loaf and carried it like a warm animal. I ate a piece torn by hand over the sink and decided that nourishment can sometimes be as simple as heat and grain and the knowledge that you paid for it without apologizing. On certain evenings, I drove the long way home to stretch the day. The radio caught a station that played songs from another decade when my hair was different and my hope was shaped like a question. I passed neighborhoods that did not know my name and felt anonymous in the best way. When I stopped at red lights, I did not look around for familiar faces. I looked straight ahead and counted the green seconds down like a practice in patience. I drove past my old street once in late afternoon, when the light turned the world the color of honey. The porch light I knew so well had been replaced or fixed. It shone steady. A few houses down, a child rode a bike along the sidewalk with training wheels that squeaked on every rotation. I did not slow. I did not accelerate. I let the car carry me the same speed a person walks when she is not late. I started using my mug for more than tea. Soup when I was sick. Coffee on Sunday morning. Hot water with lemon when sleep tried to escape me. The seam on the handle eased under my thumb like a familiar path. It reminded me that repaired things can be the strongest because they understand exactly where they were once weak. When I think of that night now, the one 3 miles from any signal, I do not see betrayal as a fire. I see it as a doorway I finally chose to use. Some doors swing open after you have tugged for years without knowing the hinge only needed oil. Some stay shut no matter how gentle or furious your hand. That road taught me which kind of door I was facing. I stepped through. On the other side was not triumph music. It was a room with a table, a chair, and a window I could open when the air grew stale. The lesson is not a slogan about independence. It is not a lesson I want printed on a throw pillow. It is about the plain work of dignity. It is the work of learning where the line lives for you, and then respecting it even when people you love insist that moving it would be easier for them. It is about saying no without dressing the word in defensive explanations. It is about accepting that some people will call your boundary cruelty because they benefited from your lack of one. I still have days when I think of my parents at the kitchen table and my sister's voice rising in a room where the chairs always faced her. I wonder what I would say if I sat there now. Likely nothing. Some truths are not for delivering to people who are committed to misunderstanding them. Some truths are for living. I drink from my mug, put my keys in my pocket, and live the truth that leaving saved me. A few months ago, I pulled into a car dealership lot by accident while trying to find a shortcut to the clinic. It was a bright Saturday. Balloons bounced against strings. Salesmen wore ties that tried too hard. Several cars wore enormous red bows on their hoods like the world was a stage, and the audience had arrived. I parked for a minute and watched from my window as a family posed for a picture, their arms looped around each other's shoulders, their smiles wide enough to hurt later. I waited for envy that did not come. What I felt instead was a soft certainty. I did not need a ceremony to confirm what belonged to me. If you have ever kept a small thing because it was the only thing that kept you, if you have stepped into the dark with your own keys in your hand and found your way home without permission, you understand. If you have had to choose between being liked and being whole, and you chose whole, you understand. If you are not there yet, if you are still sitting in a bright kitchen with your voice quiet inside your chest, I am not here to tell you what to do. I am here to say, you are not alone. The road waits whether you take it or not. The wheel does not care if your hands shake. The first mile counts the same as the 10th. Thank you for listening to me unfold a private memory in a public room. It means more than I can say. Before you go, I would love to hear your story. Have you ever drawn a line to protect something that mattered to you, even when the people closest to you disagreed? What did that moment change in you? Share in the comments so someone else can find courage in your words. If this spoke to you, please like the video, subscribe for more stories told with care, and share this with a friend who might need a companion on the drive. Thank you for spending your time here. I hope your road is safe, your home is peaceful, and your light, no matter how small, stays steady.